Hey, Vali, good to see you.
Emmanuel, as always, how are you?
Good, man. Good, good. So I kind of want to get into it right away because we were just before we turned on the podcast recording, we were talking about an incident that happened this week with one of the JTF guards, and we really didn't have this as a topic, but we just were talking about it. And I figured, you know what? Why don't we bring this up as a podcast topic? Because I think it is valid when we have incidents that involve a guard where they're either getting assaulted or they go hands on in terms of how we deal with it at JTF. And I mean, I don't want to get into all the details because I'm sure that it'll be hard to do that. But I think that we can learn from these experiences as security professionals because, you know, luckily they don't happen all the time. They happen here and there, and they're so complex that it's not, you can't create a template for it so much. You can have some general ideas, but maybe I'd like to maybe pick your brain a little bit about how security professionals and companies handle these situations where guards are assaulted, police are involved, there's incidents. I mean, the whole gamut. Maybe I'll let you kind of
Right.
talk to the listeners and we can see where it goes.
Right. Yeah, for sure. I think it's definitely a hot topic, and this is like you say, it doesn't happen too often, thank God.
Yeah.
And we mitigate these things through different through different channels, whether it's technology or having extra personnel on site or whatever it might be. But usually, we're careful around how we set up our guards, just because we want to make sure this kind of stuff doesn't happen.
Of
Of
course.
course, we work in difficult environments. The remote areas, which are response time are limited, whether it's by our teams, our supervisors, team leaders, or by law enforcement. Um, and Yeah, so we mitigate things, and then when they occur, uh, like you say, there isn't a full-on template, but there is a bit of process that we have. And that I really, really am adamant about making sure that everybody on the team kind of follows, specifically um, the higher ups. Now, higher ups are, they might be asleep, or they might be in an office, it might be, thousands of kilometers away. So then we got to make sure that when something like that happens, our guards are well supported throughout the incident, and then we gather our information, and we got to go from step A to the end, which might be Z, but there's all these variables in place, and the key element is to make sure that we can get our guard back in service once it's established that they're healthy and safe to and fit for duty. And then what do we learn from it, both as a company, as a project, and for the guard, and also for other parties involved, right? Because
So let's give some context to this, though, so we'll make sure that the viewers can hear, right? So, not details, but more context. So, you're a security guard of some sort, and you're working, everything is fine, and then all of a sudden there's an incident where, somebody, next thing you know, is punching somebody or grabbing somebody, or they're being wrestled to the ground, and I think that sometimes people, the average person or the regular person in our society, doesn't realize that when emotions get involved, that people become unpredictable, and it's all kinds of emotion: anger, sadness, frustration. uh, you know Different cultures feel, maybe they've been degraded, or somehow they've been, there's so many cultures where the word respect is communicated differently, right? Like in some cultures, asking somebody a direct question is an insult, right? Like it's very complex depending on the groups we're talking about. So when emotions get into it, people tend to do things that are unpredictable. That's general in life, right? So I know that the JTF guards, from the ones I've trained and that I've gone, that I've interviewed and I've seen, I always talk about that idea of emotional intelligence, where you understand what's happening to you and you understand what's happening to the person. But then in saying that, I mean, the guard is only one part of the equation. If the other person is emotionally invested, or emotionally over the edge, like they can't bring themselves back, or there's other people involved that maybe are friends that are egging them on, and it becomes loaded.
right,
So people will do these unpredictable things, and that's why you're saying there's no real template. right? And I understand that, right? So, give it some context here where, your
Right.
guard's
So
working, what happens, and then how did we deal with it? Because I'm always impressed with how, because I work the security industry, and I think JTF handles it really, really good. There's a lot of stuff that JTF does and you specific that do that really is above and beyond what most companies will do, which I really enjoy.
yeah, I mean, it's an advantage being a smaller, being a bit of an underdog and smaller player in the field. We didn't get to where we are by giving crappy support to our guards and crappy service to our customers, obviously,
Exactly.
right? So definitely, and this is something that I think it goes across the board for any other companies. We all try to look after our guards. We all try to be there. But it's one thing trying, it's another thing delivering, and it's the little details that go a long way. So let me give a bit of context. As you say, because emotions get involved, et cetera, et cetera, there is no template in terms of like, well, how is the outcome going to be?
Exactly.
But we can have template in place in terms of what our process is going to be internally, right?
Yeah.
So first of all, this is a case where a guard was assaulted by two individuals that had been trespassed from a site previously, and they showed up. They were being disruptive. Different people asked them to leave. They wouldn't leave. Our guard got them to leave, and then they came back. They threw a sandwich. They threw hot coffee at him, and then one of them sucker punched and jumped him. Essentially, he managed to take the guard down, to take the guy down who assaulted him. And as he was pinning him down to restrain him, the other guy ran and kicked him in the face. And then it became a bit of a blur for our guard. He still managed to keep that guy pinned on the ground. And in this case, luckily, a couple of bystanders stepped in. One of them actually pulled out some bear spray or pepper spray and pepper sprayed the guy who had just kicked our guard in the face. Anyway, so that's in a nutshell kind of what happened. We managed to keep that first assailant down on the ground until our CMP showed up and arrested him. Our guard was beaten pretty bad, broken nose, suffered a lot of cuts and bruises, et cetera, in good spirit. And of course, from there on, the process kicks in. I got word within a minute of an altercation happening at one of our sites. And then, of course, from there is that difficult trying to establish what happened because I'm not on site. I'm far away. It'll take me a good hour and a bit to get there. So I'm just trying to gather data and figure out what happened. What's the status, right? And it didn't take long before our guard came back and got back to me saying that there was an altercation and that he's on his way to the hospital. But at least by then I know he's breathing, he's typing, he's communicating, which is half the battle. And then I tried to touch base with the different people on site who kind of told me the extent, but it still is a bit of an unknown, right? So as soon as we have that bit of information, I'm not even going to care. It's a question of like, okay, well, who's a team leader, who's a supervisor, who can go out in the field and be there. And I don't care what that means. If it means you got to go spend 6 hours waiting at the hospital, that's what we do, right? If it means you got to drive 300 kilometers, that's what we do. And from there, essentially, that's what happened here in this case. We waited. I actually went to the site, ran a bit of an investigation, trying to figure out. We had a good idea who the second individual was. I actually know where to find him, probably. So we set up a bit of a team to go along with the RCMP to go get this second fella, which we arrested later that night. And for me, that was part of it, because when you look at it, it's like, okay, so we kind of made sure there was continuity in terms of the investigation, witnesses, names, et cetera, so that we have our case. Even though I trust that our law enforcement officials do that, we still have to do our due process at that level.
Of course.
And then after that, checked on our guard, eventually picked him up from the hospital, debriefed, went for coffee, hanged out a bit, went back on site, spent time with the other guards, just mingling. And for me, of course, is to, check in our guards, see where he's at. Is it humor? Where is he at really at that level? We would then follow up with another debrief 24 hours later, within the next 24 hours, just slightly, just touching base, seeing where the guard is at. And then that process continues, and based on the medical and doctors, might be a case of putting the guard through a critical incident debrief, which we do in this case, and then moving them possibly into counseling if there is any need for it. We have resources. They don't even have to tell me about it. We make the resources available to them. If they choose to pursue them, it's there, it's paid for. We'll look after all that part of it. If they are welcome to let me know that they're going into counseling or not. It could be that it's in 6 months that they're still seeing, having traumas from it. So we try to make all these resources available throughout, just throughout the career of our guards and of our staff, right? And in this case, so we did our investigation, we supported the guard. We actually managed to bust the second individual. Talk about closure. It was good having that second guy busted that same night.
Yeah.
I actually took a photo of him when he was handcuffed and sent it to our guard because I was like,
it's peace of mind, right? I mean, the guy.
Yeah. I mean, okay, peace of mind. I'll tell you that I had a bit of a run-in with one of the officers there because I did pass a comment to this individual who had assaulted our guards after we busted him. And I was like, and I knew, I got to be careful what I say, but I wanted him to know that I'd remember his face, and then I knew who he was, and that no matter where he was going to go at any sites that we work at, he's now going to run into a problem because we're going to start an order against him, judicially speaking. And so I passed the comment saying like, so you kicked one of our guards in the head, and the cop that was there just lost it on me. Not now, get out of here! You can't communicate. Blah, blah, blah. And he's making it sound like we botched his major bust that he has been working on for the past 7 years, right? Whereas we all know this fella is going to be out in 12 hours top. He'll be back out, he'll be back on the street, and that's exactly happened. Both of these fellas were let go the next morning, pending whatever court order and promise to appear or whatever else. One thing I know is one of the fellas, it's not his first dance in the field. And I'm surprised. I'm like, come on, this guy has got priors. Maybe they'll keep him for 2 days. Nothing.
Well, yeah, it's just that part of it's so sad. And I think the average person doesn't realize until it hits them at home, like until you've been assaulted and you realize, when somebody hauls off and kicks you in the head, I mean, there's all kinds of stuff that can happen between neck, spinal issues, head concussions. I mean, that person that decides to kick somebody and has no idea if that person had cervical damage before, has had concussions before, it can be
life altering.
It can be life altering, and then that person's out the next day, and that's the hardest. Like, people don't realize that, and for guards, that's why we always stress like to be situational awareness as well as emotional awareness too, to see what's going on. But in saying that, you can only be in one place. You're dealing with one person. It's hard to predict another person.
Yeah, and that's one of the elements that I'm very big on in terms of how we offer support to our guards, right? Yeah. That goes to all of our team leaders, supervisors. We need to be very cognizant here, specifically at the onset, because everybody refers to PTSD as a kind of a buzzword and traditional, but there are other factors that come into play. One of them, which it's a bit of a narcissistic disorder, and the reason I say that is because in our field of work, or in first responders in general, there is this predisposition to having a lot of kind of alpha type personalities in the field, because that's kind of what the work requires, right? But then with that comes this notion that, we have guys who are very good at what they do. And then once in a while, a glitch like that happens. And what we want to be very careful of is not to in any way put any blame on the guard, right? Like, and the reason being is there is a learning curve. What could be learned from this incident? But what we want to be careful is not to put in the guard in a position that they did something wrong, specifically in a case like this where I've run my internal investigation, I've dealt with the law enforcement, I've talked to the witnesses, and we know that our guard did everything right. These fellas were being disruptive. He was professional. He asked politely, "You got to go. You got to go." They left. They came back, and he knew to keep his distance, but he went to pull his phone to call 911, and that's when one of the guys just rushed him and hit him, right? But the important part here is not to further victimize our guard, right? He's already going. He's out of work. He's already taken a beating. He's a solid man in this case. 2-on-1, it happens. It happens to the best of us. I don't care how many years of martial arts, this and that you got. And so then there is that, there's that bruising, the ego bruising effect of it. And then, but in this case, he did really well. Despite everything, it's not a fully bloody face. He still managed to keep the other guy down for 4 minutes, 5 minutes until the cops arrived. And that's a long 4 or 5 minutes. Luckily, there was bystanders helping. Right.
It's long.
So I think that's one of the processes in terms of making sure that we don't further both victimize or dig into the wound by going to the guard and saying, hey, you could have done this better. Hey, you could have done that better. It's so easy to do kind of the quarterback, and it doesn't really serve much of a purpose, right? So that's another element in terms of like how we go about it. I never, in case I'm never going to question our guard's judgment. He used his judgment. I trust in the moment he did the best decision. He took the best decision that he could have taken, et cetera, et cetera. Now, from a company perspective, at that site, well, for me, it's very clear this is not our first incident. So I've been adamant. I've gone to the client that said, sorry, we got to up our numbers to 2 guards at any given time, and it's non-negotiable, right? And that is for the protection of our staff. That is for the well-being of the people we're protecting, et cetera, et cetera. The cost is there, but such it is, right? So that's when I feel like we need to do our due diligence moving forward. How do we ensure this doesn't? And then paralleling that, there is all the reporting and legalities and the compensation board, et cetera, that we got to fill out to make sure that our guard gets paid for work that he's losing, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, it's multifaceted, right? There's the operational aid, there's the administrative end, there's the judicial end of it. This will probably go to court. So our guard will need to become a key witness. So we'll be supporting him through that process. It could be in 6 months, it could be in 2 years. We don't know.
Yeah. See, I think what people miss here, Vali, is that you're not just a security guard. Like you've also have a deep history and work as a firefighter. And you're very used to showing up to incidents and dealing with the chaos and that's your approach is so different. A lot of people just have a security mind of a fight or a bad situation. You've shown up to all kinds of situations, car accident rollovers, house fires, this and that, and security issues like at big events and small events. And after a while, you really you realize that you got to be able to see things for what they are. And that takes, you got to come at it with, like you said, not judging it, right? And just looking at everything, getting all the facts, trying to understand, and rather than laying blame or, trying to how you can learn from that better, right? Like in this case, like the details I heard, not to get into all of them, did a great job. And you're sitting here talking to everybody, and what I think the average listener doesn't realize is how much time you spend with your guards in terms of training, in terms of talking to them, in terms of supporting them. So you already have that confidence, right? Where a lot of companies are so big, they have no idea who that person is or what level of training they have. So they're always, dealing with incident management and stuff. So
the one thing I'd say to that, Manny, is I expect any company, big or small, doesn't matter what whoever is a supervisor needs to be able to have these traits and abilities. Now, they might not be a firefighter, they might not be used to this, but you gotta, if a company is promoting somebody in that position, that person should have this ability to look from afar, not pass judgment, stay professional, and support the guard and understand the different tools that are at our disposition and put them to work, right? And I think that's what a lot of bigger companies, their issue is that it's hard to find people who have just the skill set, the experience, the understanding to be in that position. So they're putting people who are not so well versed in the field, and something happens, and then the supervisor doesn't necessarily support and isn't there,
Or he's not sure. Yeah,
or
he's
is not
not
sure,
sure.
or
Or
is
he-
not trained enough, or whatever, right? So you're right, because in this case, of course, being I might be the CEO of the company, but I didn't go there as the CEO of the company. I went there as, hey, I got to support our staff. I don't care. In this case, I could have been project director, I could have been district manager, I could have been anything. I was like, it's late. He's going to be at the hospital. He's going to be discharged from the hospital. How is he going to get back home? How is he going to get to his vehicle? And of course, we'd pay for a cab and would cover all those things. But
Of course.
it's different. Somebody going there, and we can discuss it, and it helps me understand where is he at, how
Yeah,
bad.
the sooner you see it, the better. I agree. Like this,
100%.
the next day is different. Things change, so very
Absolutely.
important. So I hats off. I mean, I don't. I know it's hard to go into details of this event, and I think I wanted everybody listening to understand, some basic things on how we approach. I mean, how JTF approaches, which I thought was spectacular. I mean, and I've been a part of a lot of different things, and usually it's not quite so understanding, and you're awesome with the guards and with all the people that work there, and your understanding of a scene is spectacular, and that's hard to kind of measure for people on a podcast, but I just know it's amazing. The other thing I wanted to kind of communicate is that when I look at this stuff, I'm always saying, where's that learning? Like, what can we learn from this stuff? And it always comes down to, you can study things tactically, but once emotions get, it really changes quickly. And you, in your life and in your training and whatever you decide, you have to build that into your training, that things will adapt and you need to change constantly. You see in sports all the time, as you get to the finals or as you get to the playoffs, they talk about playoff sports, like playoff hockey, like as different from the regular season. And it's because in playoffs, there's more emotions involved. People are thinking Stanley Cup, or they're thinking the trophy. And because of that, there's emotions. And that's the difference. And so I can't stress enough for any guards listening, like that, anytime you get mad, anytime you get sad, anytime you're extremely happy, any of the emotions that you experience, ask yourself something. Ask yourself some questions about that, and you'll learn so much about real life. That's how things happen, right? It's amazing how I'm so happy, and my kids ask me for a favor. I'm like, sure, like timing is everything. As a daughter, son, asking mom or dad, what you want at the right time is critical, right? And it's
Right.
because the emotional state allows you to say yes more likely, right? Um, yeah, so I'm really careful when I'm sad or angry or mad to kind of pull myself from that. Or when I watch people in that state, that's pretty magical. So, and these things don't happen all the time. I mean, they're not everyday
No,
things.
and I think it's important to address that. As I said, like we're careful not to further victimize our guards. But the question is like, well, had this been like a 5 foot tall or 4'7" female guard, how would have this evolved? Had this been a 6'8", 300 pound, how would have it evolved, right? And had our guard maintained 20 more feet distance, how would have it evolved, right? But like I say, it's always easy to go in hindsight and be, oh, would have
Can't
understand.
do that.
But again, I like your thing. Like, if the guard would have waited 30 more seconds before asking him to leave when the guy has had his sip of coffee and is feeling better, right? How would? But again, this is a lot of ifs and buts, and
You
I'm
gotta
not going to
address
put
it.
that on our guard, right? He did the right thing in the right time.
Yeah.
And for people who are like, well, like he was being too demanding, or something, it's like, you know what? At the end of the day, nothing justifies assaulting another person, not
Not
in a
at all.
civilized society, right? And this is the foundation of civilized society, is that you got to follow the directions, the small things. You're asked to leave, you say yes, you leave. Otherwise you don't, then it escalates and there are consequences.
Yep.
The issue we're running here is that the consequences do not match the assault. That's what we keep on saying over
Yeah.
and over and over. And this is where our staff gets also very frustrated, is we put a lot of work to protect people, to run investigations, arrest, detain, etc., and then the outcome is the slap on the wrist and you're back in the field. And who is dealing with them again? Us. And who is dealing with them again? The same guard, right? So that's part of the continuity of this. And in bigger centers, we have the ability to rotate guards so they're no longer at the same site, and we move them to a different place. But in smaller settings, well, if this fella wants to keep working and he wants his hours, then he's going to be put back in a similar site in the same town, and then he's going to bump into the same people, the same guys. And I need, as an employer, to make sure that our guard is well protected, right?
No, you're definitely doing that. Maybe other people not, but I love this topic because it's yeah, and you don't need to do it a lot. I mean, this is just because it just happened this week, so it was great to talk to you about how JTF handled it, and also shed some insight for the average person or for the guards that, because a lot of people want to talk about this stuff, but I think it's important, right? And you want to ask yourself as a guard, if it's happening a lot to you, you really got to look at yourself. You really it's like an old friend of mine who said, "Oh, I don't know why I'm always getting into fights." You just got to look at yourself. Yeah, you got to, because I mean, you don't realize like there's always two sides to it, and you can only control your side. And as long as your body language, your facial expressions, your words are de-escalating and always kind of, understanding or reasonable, you're probably not going to get into as many situations. And if not, you really got to look at it. And listen, a lot of people don't know what they look like. I totally get that. That's why you need to ask your friends or people about the situation. So hopefully, because really that's another problem I see, that there are guards out there that just don't know. They think that they're okay, but they're not doing the right thing, right?
Totally.
So you really got to make sure that you have somebody that can give you honest feedback as to how you came across, and maybe you could have done it.
And that's another spectrum altogether. Is like, well, we always look at outfitting our guards with body cams.
Yeah.
And I always say it's a no-brainer. It's a no-brainer for me, because it protects everybody. It protects our guard. If you're a professional, what do you care about stuff being filmed?
No.
We have
anyway, there's cameras everywhere.
There's cameras everywhere, but this is specific, right? Because at that specific site, this incident happened in the shadow of two camera angles, exactly in the middle of it. So we don't actually
they knew what they were doing. That's why. Like you said,
I actually think I think it was circumstantial. It was circumstantial, and that's actually an angle and a spot for a camera that I've been asking for a while, and it's coming. It's actually coming, right? But again, exactly. So how do we get what we got for tools? But body cams are a good way, but they do have downsides as well. Now it triggers people, and then you always have people who are like, "Oh, you're not allowed to film me," and it's like now you got to deal with like a 22-year-old lawyer who's going to tell you that, there's cameras everywhere filming you, but the one our guard is wearing is your problem. Really. So
I'm always for, like you said, if you're a pro and you're good at what you do, you have no issues whatsoever.
Totally.
No issues whatsoever. This idea of privacy is such a good awakening. It's gone, guys. I mean, I don't want to be a negative guy. I'm just saying, you can see the trend over the last 5 years, and at that rate, there is none. And we all need to get comfortable in living in a world where that is gone, and it's because we've given it up. And regardless of what we say, and as a guard, we just got to come to terms with it and just accept it and move on. But Vali, I just thank you for this topic. I think it's great. I know you're busy. You're a super busy guy. You got a lot to go on. So I appreciate you. Yeah, I appreciate you making the time and sharing some of the real world stuff with everybody that not everybody sees or talks about. So thank you for this topic. I appreciate it so much, and just keep up the great work you're doing on the field.
Thanks, Manny. As always, appreciate these conversations. Very valuable. And we'll be in touch. Looking forward.
Great. See you.
Be well. All right. Bye.